if you ask any coach in private, what is it you're trying to develop in the spring, they would say, oh, you know, speed, strength, power, agility, and so on. The stated goal and the choices you make in training don't match up there for many, many teams today. Hey guys, this is Keir from Strength Coach Network. Today I thought I would do something a little bit different. This is going to be a reaction video of some content that's already out there on the internet that I thought was worth looking at and sharing some thoughts on. One, because of its historical context, and two, because we can talk about what we might have learned as a field since it was first produced. If you enjoy this video and you want to see me do a reaction to other programs that are out there, drop a comment below and yeah, I'll get stuck in. If you enjoyed this video, please help us placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. So before we jump in, this video is taken from Boyd Epley, who, if I'm not mistaken, was the first strength coach in college football ever. He joined the Nebraska Cornhuskers in 1969, and he was in that position for over 50 years. During that time, 5 national championships, more conference championships than I care to mention, 350 plus wins, and he was the first president of the NSCA in 1981 onwards. So if you have ever used an equation to predict 1RM from max reps with a sub-maximal load, you have probably benefited from Boyd Epley's work. So he has touched you whether you know it or not if you're a strength coach. The video that I'm going to talk about is over 50 minutes long, but it's taken from Nebraska football back in the day when they were a true powerhouse of college football. And I wanted to talk about it for a few different reasons. One is because there's obviously some things that might not be quite so fashionable now, but there is actually a lot in that video. I think it's, you know, over 30 years old at this point. There's still a ton of value to take from it, and it's still better than what a lot of teams are doing today. So with that said, let's get stuck into this video.
The conditioning principle is specificity of training. Whether the player is a running back accelerating through a hole, a guard pulling around end to block, or a linebacker blitzing the quarterback, the player's success will be largely dependent on speed, power, and agility.
Yes, agree. Speed, power, agility, very, very important. Obviously, I think you're going to struggle to come up with umbrella general goals for a program when you have playing positions that are so different. For example, linemen and skill players. Certainly it's true that you do need speed, power, and agility to be a lineman, but the biggest determining factor is probably going to be limit strength. And that's why we see that in combine data and how the players are built and so on. So I think there could be some nuance there in saying, well, you know, every player needs all of those qualities to some degree or another, but depending on the position, you're going to need a lot more of one than the other.
Coaches oftentimes evaluate their programs based on what their coach did, or according to what the state championship team is doing.
Absolutely, still a problem today. The field is awash with sport coaches that just replicate what they did when they were players, or they look to successful teams and just blindly pick what those teams are doing and replicate that with their own athletes, rather than question the reason that a program worked or question if actually they achieved success in spite of, rather than because of the program that they use.
Unfortunately, an abundance of football coaches believe doing aerobic distance running in their conditioning program prepares football players for the fourth quarter. Many strength and conditioning coaches also believe in aerobics to build a conditioning base for football. But recent scientific research has shown that building an aerobic base contributes little to the improvement of a football player's performance.
Agree and disagree. Yes, it's true that the alactic energy pathway is the driver of outputs in football, but the idea that just because the game doesn't look like activities which stress the aerobic system, that we shouldn't train the aerobic system, because we know from physiology that's been updated a little bit over the last 30 years, the second biggest determinant of your ability to repeat high intensity activities, for example in repeat sprints, is going to be the capacity of your aerobic system to resynthesize creatine phosphate.
So let's analyze a football game. Each play involves an effort of 100% intensity for roughly 5 seconds. The demand for ATP is high And as the play ends, the first tank is almost completely drained. Between each play, there is an average of 50 seconds rest, which includes timeouts and penalties.
Slight disagreement there, which is that yes, the time motion data that they're using for the sport of football there is quite ahead of its time. There are still coaches around today that don't know how long a typical play is, how long the typical rest is, how many plays per series, how long between series, and so on. But I think it's just a little bit inaccurate to say that every play is 100% for 5 seconds, just because the nature of skill-based games is that you can't operate at 100%. You have to slow down to time and pace things. There's going to be, even within that 5 seconds, bursts of high intensity or maximum intensity activity, and it's not all 100%. So for that reason, the idea that you're going to completely deplete the creatine phosphate pathway is probably not the case. And having that kind of 30-ish, 35-second rest between plays, which you're going to find in a typical balanced offense, is probably not going to be sufficient for full resynthesis of those anaerobic substrates between plays. So it's probably not as bad in terms of the depletion, but it's probably not as good in terms of the resynthesis that the case is made in this video.
From the ATP PC energy system. Step 2 is to implement a conditioning program to develop the ATP PC energy system. Your conditioning program should be based on interval training principles. Interval training is work or exercise followed by a prescribed rest interval. The program must meet the following conditions to be specific for football. It must include work intervals that are intense with a duration of 3 to 8 seconds and rest periods lasting at least 30 seconds.
It's absolutely true that if you want to accurately replicate the time motion demands of football, the recommendations that they were giving 30 years ago at Nebraska is pretty on the mark, and there are still coaches at elite level programs in college football that spend all spring doing mat drills where it's just continuous work for 30, 40, 50, maybe 60 minutes just going around. And of course, you're developing endurance when, if you ask any coach in private, what is it you're trying to develop in the spring, they would say, speed, strength, power, agility, and so on. The stated goal and the choices you make in training don't match up there for many, many teams today.
The drills should be short and intense, simulating football actions.
Biggest criticism I would say of this entire video is probably going to be this section on agility. We'll go into some more of it later, but there's a little bit of a disconnect here where in the beginning of the video, the importance of specificity is stated, and also replicating time motion demands of football. So that kind of like 3 to 8 seconds, and really it needs to be closer to 5. Once you start to go up to 8, you're really talking about like deep passing plays or special teams plays. The majority are going to be closer towards that 5 seconds or even less for run game. So you can see some of these drills here that by the looks of it, they're going quite beyond 5 seconds, and it doesn't really look like alactic work. It probably looks to be a little bit more glycolytic, or maybe even a tad more aerobic in nature. The second thing is specificity. When you talk about specificity, you're not talking about, well, how similar does one exercise look to another? It is true that if an exercise is more specific, it's going to share more movement characteristics with the sport, the position, the movement that you're trying to enhance. But really, what you're saying with specificity is, if we do this exercise almost exclusively to the detriment of everything else, will we see an improvement in the sport, the position, the pattern that we're trying to enhance? And if you can, bet the house on it. If we improve this exercise, we're going to improve at the sport, and you're going to see that transfer between the two. And exercise is specific in nature. And of course, in team-based sports where you're having to run through that OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act, process information, make decisions, and be creative in how you apply skills, the idea that rope drills, ladder drills, closed environment agility, drills that it's going to transfer to the sport position or movement. It's just not going to be the case. It's going to be neutral or even negative transfer to those skills. But you do have to consider NCAA regulations. I don't know what they were 30 years ago, but if you were to actually pick exercises which have a high degree of specificity, for example, wrestling with linemen, you're all of a sudden breaking those rules and your hands are kind of tied. You can get around it with the language that you use and just cheat the system. A lot of teams do cheat the system. But I would say this may feel specific, but it's probably not specific for football. It's just general in nature, general specific.
Drills can be done 4 times a week, with the speed and power drills on Monday and Thursday, and the agility drills on Tuesday and Friday. Keep Wednesday as a day of rest.
Small point of difference here. It is really good that they have the Monday, Thursday, and the Tuesday, Friday workouts, and clearly from a neuromuscular standpoint, Monday, Thursday is going to be more intense than Tuesday, Friday. However, my preference is always to put the more intense or the most intense training day of the week on day 2. This is because when they're coming off the weekend and they've been making all those healthy, mature decisions as college-age athletes, there's probably a little bit more risk that if you chuck an intense stimulus on top without having the information about what kind of condition they're coming in on Monday, there's a bit more risk that they're going to either have a subpar session or worse, injure themselves. It's also a preference of mine that when you have those intense training days that you're scheduling a day off afterwards because you're putting them into a hole. So obviously Tuesday leads to a day off on Wednesday, Friday leads to a day off on Saturday. If you do it the way that it's outlined in the video, let's say you actually do have a crazy good intense training session on Monday, there's maybe some neuromuscular fatigue, structural fatigue that's there for the Tuesday session, and then you want to do more intense work, there's probably a little bit more risk. You've reached the end of part 1 of this 2-part series, but to receive an alert when part 2 drops, click the notification bell. Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.